this is in June 27th of 2016. So it's got to be higher than this now. It says the median income of a blockchain developer in the United States is around $158,000. Space, that whole industry is really blasting off. And I think it's very analogous right now to blockchain technology.
Thanks for joining us for episode 54 of Coloring Crypto, the podcast that illuminates all aspects of crypto, the blockchain, and distributed ledger technology. Today, part one of how to get a job in crypto. Our guest is Tom Hamilton, a blockchain recruiter, an old friend who shares insight on what it takes to crack into this industry. Tom's background is with Electronic Arts, Second Life, PlayStation, SpaceX, and recently Kernel, an artificial intelligence, human interface cognition company. Really an amazing background.
AI, artificial intelligence, there's a parabolic arc. It's like going up and to the right. It's advancing at an exponential rate. And human intelligence, we're flatlined.
Before I did the call with Tom, I did a quick Google search on getting a career in crypto and found some great stuff, which I'll post on the Coloring Crypto website. But it was all, for the most part, at least 6 months old. Some of it was a year and a half old. No surprise, as we're in this period now where, which we refer to as the Great Gestation. Others are calling it the crypto winter. So that was the first question. What's happening now with blockchain as a career? And the other thing is, Tom's a technical blockchain recruiter really focused on engineers. And so we're going to cover the broad spectrum. And that's why this is in two parts, because we really bring up a lot of questions in this. Whether you're an engineer and have experience in the blockchain or not, whether you're not technical and want to get involved, we want to cover the whole thing. And what we realized by the end of the conversation today is that we've really got more questions than answers. So this is an ongoing topic, and we'd love your participation if you've got thoughts and links and ideas and suggestions to share. But we're going to cover questions, like what are blockchain recruiters looking for? What does an ideal candidate look like? What schools, what companies are going to impress somebody hiring, either a recruiter or a company hiring for blockchain? By the end of the conversation, I kind of pushed Tom on defining, what's going to make a candidate really stand out? What's the equivalent of an Ivy League, school, or what companies are like your if you got Google on your resume applying for tech, that looks great. Microsoft, what's the equivalent in blockchain? And that's where we realized, we've got to have part two of this. So yeah, I invite you to join us, join us in that challenge. Go to the website, coloringcrypto.com, or just tweet me at Gabe Colors, GabeColors. The first half of this podcast is a lot of conversational indulging in tangents from politics to brain-computer interface technology, artificial intelligence versus human intelligence, debating whether we call this the Great Gestation or crypto winter, a lot of meandering in a sense. And so I'm going to share a timestamp in the show notes, and I'll drop that timestamp in just a moment so you can jump past the friendly banter, which I'll also share more about in a moment. But first, let me just, for those that want the meat of this, I'll save you all the meandering. I'll save you the entire podcast, and I'm going to give you a summary, or as the kids say these days, TLDR, too long, don't read. Isn't that just a summary? Coloring Crypto. All right, how to get a job in crypto. So first, let me tell you, the encouraging word that we came out of this with is, just like in tech, don't be intimidated that others know more than you, because in 6 months, it will all change. And also, if you feel like everybody's doing this and it feels saturated, it's not. Blockchain is not saturated. There is plenty of room. Here's a quick warning. Right now it's a candidate market. If you're highly skilled, there are companies looking for you, which means a lot of times, if you're a candidate, you're blowing off recruiters or blowing off companies. And Tom's warning is don't do that because guess what? If you don't return a phone call, these companies have records and they're keeping them. And so you're it's your brand and you got to protect it and you got to recognize that, for better or for worse, these things can be permanent. Okay, so the first thing that you should do is self-evaluate. Look at why you're doing this. If you're doing this because it sounds good, or if you're getting into crypto blockchain because it's cool, but you're not really passionate, you're going to fail. Don't apply, and that applies in general, but also for specific jobs you're looking at. Don't apply if you're not passionate about it. It's hard to fake enthusiasm. People can smell it. And so just really, this is the self-evaluation part. And then look at do you have real experience? And don't fake that either. Real experience being it's not just, your Audacity or Udemy courses. It's look at, are you getting paid to build and deliver a product? That's real experience. If you don't have that, it's okay, but just be really straight with yourself and others about that. So what can you do? Make your own product, release that, go to the best school. That would be great. Okay, if you don't have those things, if you're out of school, become as active in the industry as you can. Join the clubs, join the forums, learn as much as you can, have a voice, get involved in open source development products on GitHub, for example. We had a podcast back in the day with Ross Nichols, who's on the Dogecoin development team. And he just said, if you've got a year of development experience, just get on there. They need help. Everybody needs help. And a lot of it's very tedious, boring, but challenging work. And you can make a difference and make a name for yourself. Okay, now, once you've got this kind of background and you're looking for companies, you're networking, do your homework, research the company and figure out what the companies can either be, startups in the blockchain with blockchain experience in the company or technology companies that are moving into blockchain. And so make the distinction and understand what they're looking for. And then within them, figure out what role you want to have. Well, first of all, is the company, is it a currency? Is it doing, blockchain infrastructure? So really figure out that piece and then figure out the role you want to have. Do you want to be front end, back end? There's a lot of breadth of things that you can be involved in. And on the website, I've got more details on this where I've compiled together some of the details on roles and aspects from, deep development to front of the house to marketing, sales type stuff. Okay. In summary, make work and acquire skills. Become really good. If you do that and you learn social skills, get some networking strategies, just be a good human being, be communicative, and be positive. That'll get you there.
If you become really good and you also take the time to learn social skills and networking strategies, and you're just a good human being, you're able to communicate and you're positive, you will get the best gigs in the country and the world, for that matter.
This is part 1. And if you want to skip, go to the following timestamp. I'll put this in the show notes too. Go to 35 minutes in. All right. So we've lost the folks that want to get into the meat of it. And what was really cool in this conversation is we couldn't avoid politics. It's such a time capsule in a sense, which is why I left it in here. In the last couple of days since we recorded this, there's been, the MAGA hat kids, the Native American confrontation and all the flipping news around that. It's like our heads are just spinning. The BuzzFeed article that was then commented on by Mueller. I mean, it's just insane. And I love this concept. I don't think this is actually true, but could we explain the Great Gestation, the crypto winter, by the distraction of politics.
It's almost like like if you're in a spacecraft and suddenly the hatch door blows off and everything just gets sucked through into open space. It's like we're being sucked into the Trump NATO.
So also I want to mention a couple podcasts. I listened to one, just to throw a quick, if you haven't heard of it, on Radiotopia, is Zigzag with Manu Zakoti. They've got a whole podcast where they had been doing a blockchain company. They kind of still are. They are really doing the Great Gestation right now themselves. So check that out. But also, I love sports, and Bill Simmons' podcast is kind of my go-to. And what I found, this might sound weird to some, but I will sometimes just leave it playing in the background. It's sometimes 2 hours, and often, occasionally, fall asleep to it. And he had Aaron Sorkin on recently, the guy that wrote A Few Good Men, and they discussed these episodic shows and podcasts. So the shows like Sopranos, where people really felt like that was my friends. Those are my friends. And there's an aspect, there's really, I think, there's distinctions in podcasts. One is like the 20 to 30 minute quick hit or well-toward edited, very edited story like, and then there's like the meandering conversation. And those meandering conversations, I think the value in those is we become friends with them. And so that's part of the reason I'm leaving this, the first 20 minutes of Tom and I talking is just two old friends just really running around and tangenting. The other podcast before I jump in and get started on this is, if you haven't heard, Mike Tyson's new podcast, Hotboxing. Mike Epps, the recent one, I found it, I'm fascinated. Mike Tyson has had an entire epiphany about who he is, and he's reflecting on his younger self and all the demons he was facing. Just a fascinating American story of rebirth. So check out that, and thanks for joining us at Coloring Crypto. Let's get started.
Tom Hamilton here.
What is up, my brother? This is Gabe Mott.
Woo! Gabriel! I answered the phone kind of official, like, in case the recording was, like, already started,
We do like to have sometimes the little dink 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 dink, little Skype ring, and then they pick up, and it sounds all natural. Yeah. What cracks me up? Do you listen to the New York Times podcast, the Daily?
No, I have not listened to that.
They do a lot of that sort of, what do you call it, the form or structure, where they include a lot of like the first 10 seconds, whether it be kind of an awkward intro or a natural intro or the phone ringing. And I used to love it, and now it kind of annoys me. But it's funny.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of old school. Like,
well, it's also, I was listening to a couple of podcasts today, a couple from like Radiotopia, or like there are these very structured, very heavily edited podcasts. And when we first started Coloring Crypto, that was our intention. But man, I had two people working with me. One guy interning, did all the audio engineering, and the other guy editing. It took us days to do one episode, like working like 2 full days of editing. So it was like,
wow,
all right,
seriously?
Yeah, cut that. We're going to go with like the long form, Bill Simmons, Joe Rogan, like my my stutters. It's all in there. The boring parts. My mom's my best feedback person. She wrote me an email last week and said, I liked this part, but then you could tell she was like giving me like, the positive with like the negative feedback of like, it got a little long and meandering.
Oh my God. Wait, that was one of the edited versions, or
no,
the regular one?
In the last 3 months, we've completely gone, like, I just audio engineer it where I take out any really terrible things or like,
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
It's so funny, man. I went in and did a little bit of research on just what I thought we would explore is like, getting a job in the blockchain and what you've been doing and your whole take. And then, and then got all, like, I have been sucked into other news and podcasts, and I'm like addicted to this political crap.
Oh, dude, I know it's all consuming right now.
It's all consuming. I know.
It's like more. It has more. It has a stronger gravitational pull. It's almost like a like if you're in a spacecraft and suddenly the hatch door blows off and everything just gets sucked through into open space. It's like we're being sucked into the Trump NATO.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like I was almost thinking I was listening to a bunch of stuff. I listened to Fox even. I listened to MSNBC. I like just get on YouTube and start scrolling through, and NPR, of course. And I was just like, God, like the whole story is like, if this is true or we don't know yet, like, you know what I mean? And it's like I really wish I could just get blocked from it until the Mueller report comes out. Just like don't keep me out of it.
I know, man. It's yeah, well, here's the thing. Considering that all you have to do these days, if you have an iPhone, right, is just swipe right, and suddenly you're looking at Apple News, and there's always like a juicy lineup, no matter what time of day.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm sorry, I don't read the news. In fact, I usually avoid the news, but this has even got me sucked in.
Nobody fucking knows.
I mean, I saw a really interesting article which said it was by a pretty well-known and respected political pundit who'd worked for several major people. I'm like, me talking politics is like me talking sports. Like I'm not, my depth of knowledge is very shallow. But this guy said that his prediction was that Trump would resign in 2019. And the reason being, he would use his resignation as his bargaining chip to avoid going to prison,
and to make sure his family gets out of gets a free pass.
Yeah, of course. Which, by the way, why on God's green earth? This is something that I think Colbert might have said, or Jimmy Kimmel, or whomever. But like, why did freaking Cohen plead guilty and not like get himself a pardon or some kind of immunity?
Yeah, I think this exactly goes to the point of like Mueller either has released 90% of the stuff or like 10%, and we really have no idea, But we can't answer that question until the report comes out.
My feeling is that Mueller knows exactly what he's doing, and it's like a chess game, and I believe it will end in checkmate. And Mueller already knows how this game ends.
Well, here's my big concern is, and I think you're right. But my big concern is that meanwhile, Trump's got us focused on him, and people are on strike. The teachers are on strike in LA. People are working these multiple jobs. They need health care. Like I really like the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez platform, but like. Just a couple more things, man, and I think this is pretty funny. But like your analogy of a spaceship and the air just sucking everything out, and like it's so consuming. And I wonder if like part of like the blockchain crypto gestation period is that like who can really focus on anything else? It's so distracting until like this political stuff just gets us off of our news feeds. I don't know. That's a bit of a leap.
Oh yeah.
But
no. I mean, it could very well be. It's good. I mean, it's kind of like the perfect like segue back to crypto. If you are a true believer in cryptocurrency and blockchain and the future applications and the future value, and this, by the way, this is one of the things that I liked about the guy whose sales pitch offer I sent you. And for those of you who might be listening to this, should this make it to the recording, this is Mike Gillard. He's a life coach and success guru who his brand is the Self-Made Man, and he sent out a thing to his list. He is very bullish on crypto, and his approach is just to invest in crypto a set amount across his selected cryptocurrency portfolio. And whether it's up or whether it's down, he invests the same amount every single month. And after he got hacked like I did, I think he had millions in Mt. Gox when it got taken down. But after that happened, like since he started reinvesting, he has not sold a single coin. And so that's all about the long haul.
I listened to most of that, and it was fascinating to hear both them talking about, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes, where they were both saying, hey, it wouldn't be so bad if Bitcoin went down to $3,000, and just stayed there for a couple more months, just so we have time to employ that model of putting some more money in and just getting more of this stuff. Because they're long term.
It's like the first skyrocket, the first gold rush was back when Bitcoin was so new, and the people who have been with Bitcoin since the beginning, they know all these details. There's been like 3 or 4, maybe 5 of those giant leaps up and then the plummet back. But however, the new baseline, the new floor of the desert has consistently been higher. I mean, when I got into Bitcoin in 2013, it went from being in the teens up to the final peak point of maybe like 1,100, right? And then it took a not so perilous. It kind of meandered its way back down, but then the new valley floor was the $300 range,
right?
And then so it's funny now that maybe the new $300 range is the $3,000 range.
And then it's like, well, how long is that? Are we talking like months or years before it gets out of this? There's a lot of podcasts I'm hearing and Medium articles calling this like the big, blockchain or crypto winter. And we had called it on Clone Crypto with some interviews. We called it the Great Gestation. And I think Great Gestation is just a little bit more positive. And winter seems a little more. It's a little more. What is it? Winter's. Game of Thrones. But dude, okay. So
the crypto winters is here. Yeah.
Before we get into, I want to really like find out what you're doing as a recruiter in the blockchain, and let people kind of know what that's all about and how you got into that. I want on this podcast to target folks that are interested in getting into the blockchain as a career, and finding out more about it. But I also want to let them know like that you are somebody who has taken so many brave dives into sort of self analysis, self work, but also as it relates to career. And I think your career path has been really fascinating. And if you wouldn't mind, maybe kind of give us your background before blockchain.
Let's see. Well, my career in technology has been as a technical recruiter, right? And so us recruiters, we all kind of joke about how no one ever sets out to become a recruiter. You just sort of happen to fall into it somehow. Well, for me, it was that I'm a musician in my spare time, and I wanted to make an album. And I knew I was playing in 3 different bands, and I was, barely making ends meet. And I decided, okay, I want to make my first album, and if I'm going to do that, I need some real money. And so I decided I want to get a job. With internet access, this is back before the first .com boom, and I decided, it just so happened through my then girlfriend at the time that she knew a headhunter who had a client in France. I spoke French. One thing led to another. I got hired, and I was in Paris on business, doing business in French during the World Cup in 1998. So I was recruiting French national engineers in Silicon Valley. And what's the point that comes to mind for anyone who might be listening, what I realized is like, it doesn't, when you're new to something, all you can think about is how many more people have been doing it like way longer than you have. And it kind of can instill you with a sense of hopelessness, like I'll never catch up. Well, technology, it doesn't matter, because when you start, guess what? 6 months from when you start, it'll all be new anyway. So it doesn't matter. You won't be behind. You'll be right in sync with everybody else. And that is something I learned through technical recruiting. So that took me to Linden Lab, where I recruited developers for Second Life, 3D virtual world. That was my exposure into my first introduction to video games. And then I went to Electronic Arts, then I went to PlayStation. And then a colleague of mine went to SpaceX, and she recruited me. She reached out, hey, do you know any senior technical recruiters? And I said, yeah, I might. But this was in 2010, and nobody knew who SpaceX was. Nobody knew who Elon was. I mean, in Silicon Valley, people knew who he was, but he was not the titan that he is today. And I toured the rocket factory, and I saw it, and I went, holy crap, this is the real thing. This company is going to go on well beyond my lifetime. And so even though it was an unknown to most people, I mean, I knew this was it. And so I jumped in.
God, that's so funny. Like literally a rocket ship.
Yeah.
You know, like that's the ideal startup to get involved with, is a company that you can tell they're just, people are all engaged in active roles, and it's just growing fast, and it's got a promising future, and that's where you want to work.
Well, yeah. And I don't know. I mean, a lot of people agree with this. And now, I mean, it's like, to think SpaceX is cool now. I mean, it's like the SpaceX in the tech community, it's not necessarily a household name globally, but, you know, in tech circles, you know, SpaceX, you know, it's a hot ticket. I can't tell you how many conversations I had as a recruiter explaining to people that who we were and what we were doing, and talking about the unique value proposition of developing reusable engine technology and being, you know, a commercial spaceflight provider. And I had to learn the whole space game from scratch. I didn't know a damn thing. My boss at that time, her name's Dolly Singh. Shout out to Dolly, wherever you are. She gave me the first 3 weeks, just go on the internet, surf, you know, rabbit hole on the web, and learn about this industry, because I didn't know a damn thing. But that is the thing, like, that's the curiosity that I had, and the fact that SpaceX captured my imagination is a phenomenon, just in a different echo, that happened for me with blockchain and Bitcoin specifically. Because when I heard about Bitcoin and I read about it, all of a sudden I was like, holy shit. Like, this Bitcoin's going to 1 million, right? I mean, that was my thought.
And so you spent a nice chunk of time at SpaceX and saw it grow quite a bit. And then, as I recall, what, about maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago, you left?
The last thing that I wanted to add is part of my the sort of preamble, my history, which is very much in the theme. So I had the good fortune. I took a sabbatical from SpaceX. I took 3.5 months off, and when I came back from my sabbatical, I got a email from a recruiter who was working on behalf of Brian Johnson, who is the founder and CEO of Kernel, Kernel.co, and they are I will call them a neurotech company. Brian Johnson is the one who built Braintree, which is a payments company that went on to acquire Venmo, and ultimately Brian sold the whole kit and caboodle to PayPal for $800 million. Brian's quest for wealth was not for wealth itself, but was to build his war chest so that he could do good in the world. He created a fund called the OS Fund, which is short for Operating System, because he believes that if you want to fundamentally improve or upgrade any system by an order of magnitude, you must do so at the level of the operating system. So Brian recruited me to come run recruiting at Kernel, and he and I agreed I would give him a year, build the company to the next stage, and then I would move on to pursue my own thing, which is ultimately exactly what happened. But you know, Brian Johnson is another visionary, you know, and what he's doing at Kernel, you know, he talked about optimizing, enhancing human cognition, and it just blew my mind. I was reading a sci-fi book at the time where all humans had advanced cybernetics built into their brains, and I was just like, this is where it's all going.
Now, as you're saying that, as a field I don't know at all, but as you're saying it, I'm thinking like, this sounds like AI. And are you not saying AI because it's gotten so kind of like cliche, or it's just vague, or am I just off base?
Well, no. It's actually brilliant that you just said that, because Brian, he named one of his holding companies HI, which stands for human intelligence. And what you just pointed to at the perfect moment in the train of thought was, there's been so much focus and research and development and investment on the advancement of AI, the evolution of AI, and there is this, call it a quest, to reach human level intelligence in an artificial intelligence, which of course, Ray Kurzweil famously coined the term the singularity when people who this is their field of specialty, they'll, please forgive me because I'm not going to use exactly the right terminology. But there's been so much focus and attention on advancing artificial intelligence. And Brian Johnson's point is AI, artificial intelligence, there's a parabolic arc. It's like going up and to the right. It's advancing at an exponential rate. And human intelligence, we're flatlined. How has our intelligence improved over time? We get more knowledge in our brains, but like our hardware is not upgraded. We don't have fundamentally new cerebral capacities. So his whole thing is we're already doing a dance with artificial intelligence. Like look at our iPhones. We interact with artificial intelligence every single day. Alexa, Google Home, whatever it is. There's countless ways that we have that AI is already present in our life.
Right.
And so, Brian would talk a lot about. Brian is a great appreciator of Elon Musk from the perspective of, well, especially when it comes to brain-computer interface technology. Like when I joined Kernel, it wasn't. I came directly from SpaceX to Kernel, and it wasn't until I got to Kernel that I learned that Elon was actively pursuing the technology. And me being at SpaceX, I didn't know that Elon was actually doing something about the whole brain-computer interface technology. These days, Elon hiccups and there's a Twitter storm. I mean, it's like it doesn't matter what he does, like it gains tons of attention. So these news stories about Neuralink.
Wait, okay, so help me. I hadn't followed Neuralink. Then what's the relationship between Kernel and Neuralink?
They're essentially out to accomplish the same thing.
Okay, so they're basically competing companies in a sense.
Yeah, like what Neuralink is doing is they're developing ultra high bandwidth neural interfaces. It falls in the realm of medical devices. Like this is invasive technology. You have to have a craniotomy to get these things put in your brain. They got to cut open your skull. That's not where it's going. That's not where it's going. Because who's gonna raise their hand and say, please cut open my skull and put this shit on my brain?
You've been working at Elon Musk's company, SpaceX. You then go to a company doing, brain-computer interface technology, and here you are. And this should be positive, a positive sign for all the folks, in the gestation period, aka crypto winter, that you're turning to the blockchain. When you have all these amazing other opportunities out there, and you're saying, "No, blockchain. Let's do the blockchain." So tell us. You bring us home with that piece.
Oh man. Well, Elon founded SpaceX in 2002. And here we are in 2018. SpaceX is literally blasting off. The space, that whole industry is really blasting off, and I think it's very analogous right now to blockchain technology.
Yep.
If you look at, if we just take Bitcoin as the flagship, right? It happened for me with SpaceX. It happened for me with Kernel. It happened for me with Bitcoin. Just where you had that holy shit moment with crypto, with blockchain. We're not, you call it the crypto winter, but it's like if you have consumed enough information to believe that it is a viable technology with infinite potential application, then you won't give a shit that we're in the winter. Because guess what? Winter is always followed by summer. Unless it's a nuclear winter, and I don't think we're in one of those.
Coloring crypto.
I saw a stat today where this is from August from AngelList, but of the hires, if you want to go work for a startup in blockchain, 64% of the jobs are in engineering, right? They're developers. And as far as I understand it, that's what you're looking for. That's what you're recruiting is the coders, the developers, the engineers.
Yeah, correct.
And so I'm gonna speak a little bit. I'm gonna write up when I publish the show notes, I'll put up a blog post and kind of put some links to, like, if you're not a developer, what are the opportunities to get involved? What jobs are there in the blockchain? But then also we can kind of end with this idea of what does it take to ramp up and get there. Like you said, like that thing earlier, you were talking about the technology being such a fast changing thing that you can take 6 months and get caught up to speed with a lot of it. That's a long way of asking, what's a description of an ideal candidate?
To answer your question, like, I'll start with something specific and then go a little more general. Currently I'm recruiting for a senior software engineer for the blockchain for a company called Procurement. And they are building a distributed software as a service platform, which will be blockchain enabled, which will essentially service the global food supply chain. So in this case, they are looking specifically for somebody who, as a senior software engineer, independent of any blockchain expertise, has experience developing. They need to know Java, for example. The company's a Java shop, so they got to be comfortable in front end, middle tier, back end Java technologies. Then on top of that, ideally, they will have done blockchain development specifically for Ethereum, because Procurement has decided that that's the blockchain that they want to use on the back end of their supply chain solution.
Are the companies, like, is Procurement and other companies you work for, do they tend to kind of adopt this idea, almost like SpaceX did with you? Find a really talented person with experience, in this case with Java or coding, because you've got to have that, takes years. And let's take a month, 2 months, 3 months, and let's teach them the blockchain. Or are they saying, no, we want somebody who's already up to speed because we don't have time for that?
Well, here's the thing. I think it depends on the company, right? So, like, Procurement, they're not a blockchain company. Like, that's not their thing.
Right.
They are a global food supply chain solution maker, a platform builder that happens to be blockchain enabled. They're bringing blockchain in to create the element of food trust and food security and traceability. And they're going to leverage the Internet of Things with sensor technology at all points, myriad, countless, gajillion points in the global food supply chain. So blockchain is not their core. But, like, I have a guy I worked with at Kernel, a guy named Stephen Cade. He went with a couple of the former Kernel engineers, and they founded a company called Trust Token, which is, so they are a blockchain company. They have created Trust Token.
Is it a stable coin?
Yes, it is.
God, I just heard an interesting talk. Man, it's so funny. Like there's times when I feel like I get what's going on, and there are times I'm just like, oh my God, what the hell is going on? But I wonder if, like, one of the, so let's say we're talking to a developer and they're saying, what do I need to do to get a career in the blockchain? Maybe one of the first distinctions is to figure out, which side is heavy with the company. Are they a classic tech company going into the blockchain, or a startup in the blockchain? where they already have that expertise in there, and they just need really smart developers.
Well, yeah, it's also like where do you want to? It reminds me of the food chain, right? It's like where do you want to participate in a blockchain? There's so many different types of companies, and there's so many. Like, do you want to be involved on the cryptocurrency side? Do you want to be involved in a blockchain infrastructure scenario?
Have there been moments for you where you're either talking to somebody or reading something when a new level of ability to explain, this stuff, like what you're saying, you prep yourself well enough so you sound so you can just have a knowledgeable conversation with these people you're recruiting, and have there been resources you found, books or articles or even just podcasts or even just conversations with people where it's clicked in and you're like, oh man, that was a great, I'll go back to that person because that really helped me get the paradigm.
Yeah, I mean for sure. And I still, you and I have talked about this just in our social hang times. It's like, on the one hand, I feel like I probably know more, I will say specifically about cryptocurrency, because I went through there's probably a 2-year period of buying and trading crypto. I probably know a lot more about that than many people. But when it comes to blockchain and the actual code underpinnings of the distributed ledger foundation of blockchain and how it all works and why it's immutable, and it's just like life, dude. There's always more to freaking learn, and I feel like in these conversations I always feel to some degree like a fraud. I mean, I never would prop myself up as an expert because there's just way too much I don't know.
Well, especially talking to developers, my experience, I had a few developers on this podcast, notably one of the Ross Nickel, who's on the Dogecoin development team, and it can just so quickly get fascinating, but just thick with concepts and words I don't know. How did you connect with Pure Current? How do you connect with companies that are looking to hire in the blockchain?
It's pretty simple. Like the block. Okay, this now goes out to, should there be anybody who's listening who actually is thinking about pursuing a career in blockchain. What I'm hearing from blockchain developers that I'm talking to is that they're in very high demand. This technology is so new. The most senior people that I've run into, like, they have maybe 3 years of experience, and mostly it's like a year or a year and a half.
Yeah.
Like recently I've spoken to some folks who work for Consensus, which is like, just loosely call it the Ethereum company, right? And you talk to people who are working in those types of environments. I mean, those people have real experience. Like, it's not just project work. It's not Udacity courses. It's not Udemy courses. Like, they actually are getting paid to build and deliver a product. Like the very, I would say, explosive growth in blockchain, the applications of blockchain technologies in technology companies around the world, that has created a demand, and that has been the vacuum which has sucked me into the space from a recruiting perspective.
Yeah. What were you talking to Consensus about? Were you looking to work with them, or how'd you end up talking to them?
No, I wasn't talking to the company. I was talking to their people.
Oh, you were going to poach some Consensus employees.
Well, there have been layoffs. There have been layoffs.
Oh, right. I was just messing with you. Yeah.
Well, no, but I mean, no, but that's well played, because the answer to that is, in addition to what I said, yes. Because it's perfect time to poach, because they're experiencing financial instability, which is a whole other topic.
Are they calling you, or are you kind of like going through LinkedIn and calling them, or looking at press releases and seeing who's having layoffs, or how does that work?
That's the question where the answer is yes.
Yeah, it's a secret formula. It's the special sauce.
No, the special sauce is all of the above.
Yeah.
And the thing with what I always feel like, I always say it's funny. I used to even say this when I was at SpaceX. Like, recruiting is not rocket science. It's just not. Like, the people who are the most successful at recruiting are the people who learn the basics and just consistently apply the basics. And if you're consistently applying the basics, which means if you're prospecting, because recruiting is sales in its own way. If you're prospecting for candidates consistently on a regular basis, you are going to your diligent effort is going to coincide synchronistically with somebody's bad day or somebody's pink slip or somebody's boredom, and your message or your email is going to reach them on a day. You know what? Fuck this place. Like, I want to see what else is out there. And then you're off to the races.
And so ideally, you're to be the most successful blockchain recruiter you could be, you have just a vast, really high quality network of blockchain developers that's just growing and knows everybody, and you're reading
yeah, it happened for me. One of the companies I was already working with, they decided they wanted to hire a blockchain developer, and that got me tuned into the space from a recruiting perspective. And then, I went and searched on LinkedIn. Dude, I thought to myself, I should set up we should set up a specialty for blockchain recruiting. Well, there's tons of people out there doing it already.
Yeah, like they've got a consulting firm names. They're just recruiting. Well, this is them doing the recruitment.
That's the thing. Now, and this is the thing too. Like for any job seekers out there, just because, if people notice a gold rush where everyone's getting their picks and shovels, their crypto picks and crypto shovels, and they're rushing off to become Hyperledger experts. But then they notice everybody else doing it too, and then they start to think, well, if everybody else is doing it, maybe I should not do that. Well, I would just say there's always room at the top. If you become really good and you also take the time to learn social skills and networking strategies, and you're just a good human being, you're able to communicate, and you're positive, you will get the best gigs in the country and the world, for that matter.
Now, what are some? So if somebody's listening to this and they're a developer and they've got both development experience and blockchain experience, and they're talking to you, what are some common mistakes people make, or just what slows down the process of working with a recruiter like you? Like just kind of giving tips and tricks of what's the best way to work with a recruiter.
Well, so right now, let's say the past year up until today, it's been a white hot job market, favoring job seekers.
Right. Okay.
Been a very tight labor market. It's been a candidate driven market, which means, it's like these things go in cycles, right? Like when the economy's down, people are out of work. And so there's way more candidates than there are jobs. And competition is fierce, and companies can afford to, not respond and just say, yeah, whatever, because there's a plethora of candidates. Well, the reverse is true when it's candidate driven. So right now, what we find, if you're recruiting engineering talent, engineers, they can afford to not respond. They can afford to not show up for an interview because they've got 5 to 10 companies after them. So what I would say to any job seeker is, like, you should conduct yourself in a professional manner, whether it's high season or low season, because you're building your name, your career, it's your brand. And even if you're a young developer and you're just fresh out of college and you're only in your early 20s, well, guess what? Like, companies now have applicant tracking systems that are proprietary and don't, those records are there for good. And if you don't show or you act like a jerk, you'll get blackballed. And 7-8 years from now, when you see an opportunity, you want to get that company, you might find your calls and emails not getting answered. Do your homework, research the company, like just have a very appreciative and hungry spirit. And you know what else? Like, don't apply for jobs you're not passionate about, because you're not gonna care. It's hard to fake enthusiasm.
That was you just said that was a very rich response there. I'm going to kind of go backwards through that, because in my experience, we can get kind of tired of, if you're in a job hunting position, you can get really exhausted and just start sending out resumes with like weak cover letters, and they're just not going to be attractive. But then to say, when I was asking about, I like how you kind of twisted this, because even though it's a market that heavily favors qualified candidates because they're just on short supply, it's still important to be professional and respectful and all those things, because it does come around. And that idea of it being a permanent record is something I would have thought of, but I wouldn't have really thought of. So yeah, important point to highlight there. If the market is favoring candidates, your job is a headhunter, and if it's favoring companies, it's a recruiter.
No, headhunter, recruiter, it's the same thing. I think there are definitely connotations to headhunter. Like, I don't think, when I was a recruiter for SpaceX, or if you were a recruiter for Google, you wouldn't refer to that recruiter as a headhunter. Like, headhunter typically, in my mind, refers to an agency recruiter, like someone that's got they're an independent party, and they work with companies who hire them either on a retained basis. That's like they pay a fee up front, pay 1/3 at the beginning, 1/3 in the middle, 1/3 at the end, or a contingency, which means you work for free until you place somebody, and then you get 25% fee. But those agency recruiters are what I think of when I think of headhunters.
Okay, that's helpful.
And there are blockchain headhunters that have their own boutique firms who specialize in it.
Well, what I want to get at is people who are listening, who are developers, but they're not quite in the circle of they're not going to show up on your radar. They didn't already work for Consensus. They don't have that on their resume. They're really just they've got nothing great blockchain on their resume. Basically, what does someone like that do to get in a position where, ideally a recruiter calls them, but I mean, can they call, how do they cross that threshold where they get on a map and get into that hot pool?
Like to from the point of just starting out, in other words?
I mean, is that
what you're saying? Like, people who they don't have, it's sort of like the chicken or the egg, right?
Yeah,
or the catch 22. Like, for people who if you want to be in a new technology industry that is taking off, and you haven't built your resume yet, all you can do, so in video games, we'd say, go make your own game. You get into the best schools you can, and if you're already past the point, let's say with blockchain technology, if you're out of school already, well, then you become as active in the industry as you can. You join the clubs, you join the organizations, you get involved. I mean, hello, blockchain is all open source. So you get involved in open source development projects. Like, if you're passionate about it, if you're doing it because you think it's cool and you want to be in the it thing, and that's the primary driver, but you don't really care, then you're going to fail. You're going to always be on the outside. But if the switch is flipped and it's lit your fire, you're just going to be all up inside of it, and you just can't get enough. If you do something like that, it's a project that you can put on your resume that you can point to, and it shows that you actually built something. And it doesn't, you don't have to win a Nobel Prize for it, but it just shows that you're making work and you're acquiring skills.
You know what would be kind of cool as we kind of wrap this up is I'm gonna post this, and I've got like this blog post started with some links, but it'd be cool to kind of come up with, you know, like what are the half dozen things that, you know, a recruiter might see and they go, they went to this school, or they finished, you know, a certain class at Consensus, or they worked in this open source project on GitHub.
So here's the thing, what I take, you bringing that up, wouldn't it be cool to have this repository of, basically it's the roadmap or the treasure map. Go get involved, like go to these schools if you can, or if you can't get into those schools for either academic or financial or immigration reasons or whatever, you get into this program, or you start studying this framework, learn this language. So in other words, I the way I received that was like a challenge. Like, wouldn't it be cool to come up with that? I'm like, yes, it would. And I would like to accept that challenge, accept that mission to come up with a repository to come back and repost, to your site on this podcast, as far as things that people can do who want to get into blockchain and want to build a career in blockchain, some do's and maybe even some don'ts. I really think it'd be cool to have like the let's call it, what's the name for them? The whammies, the jaw droppers, the things that get you in any door, because you went to, like, I mean, I think if you go to school at Consensus, like you said, like they are like almost synonymous with Ethereum, and those guys consistently have a reputation for knowing what they're doing. Like a list, like they're maybe like, in the Ivy League of companies, and they have classes, they have schools. Knowing what I know, it's very limited. Like, two things. I would go to one of Consensus's, like, I think they have like 3-month programs. But then the other thing I would do, that Ross at Dogecoin recommended, he said, like, if you have a year of development experience, you can get into any of these open source coins, and they need people. They need people to help. And he's like, it's really boring. It's very tedious, but it's not that it's not rocket science. To kind of finish up on that. But yeah, man. Well, yeah. If you have any suggestions for that, we'll have a draft up on. We're going to release this on Sunday. We'll put up a draft with this. I'll have the link in the show notes, and then we can kind of even add to that as we come up with, like, it's a good challenge of, like, what are these kind of like preeminent. What do you call them? Must be a word in recruitment. Sure. The resume zingers. The badassness is. Man, isn't that fun? You just pointed to a missing in the lexicon of recruitment. I can't think of any such word. All
right, that's our first challenge.
Yeah, to figure out what that word is, or make one up.
Yeah.
But no, just for anyone who's listening, check it out. I just did a little flip search on my phone, and it says there's a core thread which says this is in June 27th of 2016. So it's got to be higher than this now. It says the median income of a blockchain developer in the United States is around $158,000.
This is in 2016.
Yeah. And then the person says, "What do I need to know to get a job as a blockchain developer?" So here's the thing, dude. We could even call this part A, and we could have a part B. And dude, now that we've fleshed out all these topics, I feel inspired to go deep diving on some of these topics and come back with some answers.
Let's do it, man. And we can even look at, like, we can even check in with some of these schools. We'll use the podcast as our excuse, and we can even, like, get some interviews with some people, and we'll make the master list.
I love it.
How do folks, if they want to find out more, or someone wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Best way to do that, I'd say 2 ways. One is you can find me on LinkedIn, my LinkedIn profile, Tom Hamilton. And then you can also email me at tom@tomhamilton.com. If you're a blockchain developer and you're looking for a gig, or if you're looking to get into blockchain, or if you're a company that wants to incorporate blockchain technology into your stack, and you need people, hit me up, any and all the above. And, this is all in the spirit of networking and common learning and sharing and growing, and it's all just exciting. So, Gabe, thank you for creating this forum for discussion for the benefit of all of us.
Coloring Crypto.
Coloring Crypto is hosted by Gabe Colors. Our audio producer is Aaron Garber. Our content producer is Dan Weiner. And our parent company is Chapin Labs. The informations, opinions, and recommendations presented in Coloring Crypto are for general information only, and any reliance on the information provided in Coloring Crypto is done at your own risk. This podcast should not be considered professional advice.
Subscribe now.
You have to have a craniotomy to get these things put in your brain. They got to cut open your skull.